Hello everyone, and thanks for joining us here on this second webinar on the Future Classroom Scenarios course. My name is Benjamin Hertz. I'm the coordinator of the Future Classroom Scenarios course, and I hope you've already seen my introductory videos. Now, this webinar today is all about the iTEC project, and if you've been following the course so far, you've come across some videos directly from the iTEC project, and a lot of the material that we're presenting on the course is actually directly coming from that project. So it's a pleasure to welcome Will Ellis tonight. He's the iTEC project manager and has been leading the project for the last 4 years. iTEC is actually coming to an end this year, this month in fact, so we are right at the end of the project, and Will tell us a bit more about the key insights from that project and from the process of developing future classroom scenarios and then piloting them in schools. So I hope everybody can hear, and if you haven't yet done so, why not post a quick message to everybody in the chat, just saying where you are. I see there's lots of people already here, although we're a smaller group than last time, but I'm sure there will still be people joining. So let me pass over now to Will, who will be running this webinar, and well, enjoy. Will, we can't hear you. Will, unfortunately, we can't hear you.
Right, okay, sorry about that. So just checking that everyone can hear me clearly now. So if you've got a problem, then maybe check your audio settings, but I'm hoping in the next few seconds people can give me feedback that they can hear me clearly, and then I'll start. So if that's okay, I'll continue. Okay, good, great, brilliant. Okay, it's working, excellent. Thank you very much. Great, okay, good. Then in that case, we'll start. Okay, so thank you, Ben, for introducing me. As Ben mentioned, my name is Will Ellis, and I am the project manager for the iTEC project. And I'm going to be explaining a little bit more about what the iTEC project is, because importantly, the iTEC project is the background to the course that you are now doing. And I hope the course is going well for you. So just to kick off, I need to explain a little bit more about the project, and also explain a little bit more about some of the language we're using in the project. So you're familiar with terms, I hope now, of learning scenarios, the future classroom, terms like learning activities and learning stories we talk more about later in the course. So I'm going to try and explain all of these in the context of the iTEC project, which I manage. Okay, so just to start with, just to give you some of the background of the iTEC project. It started 4 years ago, and as Ben mentioned earlier, we're now in the last year, in fact the last month of the project, so it's very exciting. It's been a very successful project, and we're looking forward to concluding it. And part of the successful outcome of the project is this course and other courses we run. To give you a bit of background, the first slide I'm showing you here tells you several things about the challenge we were presented with at the beginning of the project. And this challenge was that the needs of learners are changing, and one of the areas in which this is changing is in terms of the skills that young people need for future society. So you've already seen in some of the previous course material the concept of 21st century skills, skills of collaboration, communication, creativity, those kind of skills, and independent learning. The needs of learners are changing. Learners need those skills. And the reason for that being that society and jobs are changing. So in Europe particularly, the economy of Europe really depends on creativity, good communication, good collaboration. One of the things that we look at and we think can't change very much are things like school buildings, where we all work. It's very difficult to change them because it's costly, it's expensive. And for the same reason, the resources we have available to us aren't necessarily changing very rapidly. Having said that, with the growth of the internet and social networking and these kind of things and free open access tools, there is a lot of resources available that are cheap or even free to use. So given the needs of learners are changing, but schools and resources aren't necessarily changing, what needs to change? And so what we're looking at in this course is how teaching and learning could change to support learners develop those skills for the future classroom. So to begin with, a very common theme when thinking about the classroom is, what does it actually look like? It's physical space and what resources do we have available. Now the picture I'm showing you here is a picture which some of you will recognise. It may be the sort of classroom that you were taught in. It's very similar to the classroom I was first taught in. And it hasn't changed a great deal. Maybe the desks are more modern, but there are many classrooms I've visited across Europe that look very similar to this in terms of physical space. And although there might be more modern desks, the arrangement of desks and teacher has stayed pretty much the same. So there are visions of a future classroom which have been created through many projects and lots of research. And this picture, well, I'm not sure what this picture is showing, but some of the visions for a future classroom are things that none of us would recognise and things that none of us would be particularly comfortable with as teachers. So they're futuristic visions that aren't necessarily realistic. And there are ideas about the future classroom that it could be, well, there'll be no classroom. It's a classroom without walls. We can learn and teach wherever we want. But for many of us, again, this is a step too far. It's too visionary. And it seems unlikely that this will work. There are reasons why children go to school, not just to learn, of course, but also so parents can work during the day. So the school has multiple roles. So the idea that children can stay at home all day and work, or work whenever they want and work wherever they want, is perhaps for many of us too unrealistic and too visionary. So what do we do about that? Well, that was the challenge that the iTEC project was set, to define what the future classroom would look like, without trying to come up with some visionary, futuristic model. Okay, so I'm going to ask you the first question now, and it's actually very valuable to us, the answer to these questions. It's a two-way conversation we're having here with you, because it actually helps us in our work to understand the answers you give us. So in this first question, which of these three statements do you think is most likely? The first one, schools will be abolished in the next 10 years and formal learning will be replaced by technology-assisted informal learning. So no more schools. The second one, schools will revert to traditional teaching methods. So much more chalk and talk, so say blackboards, textbooks, things will go back to basics, back to traditional methods. Or perhaps schools will be very much the same as they are right now. So please take a few moments to look at those three questions and give us your view on how you think schools will change in the next 10 years. Which of those is most realistic?
So, well, I've already opened the poll, so everybody can start responding. You should be seeing on the right-hand side of the webinar the question with the three answers. Just choose one of the three answers and then press submit. I'll give about sort of 30 seconds overall before I close the poll. We have 22 answers so far. I'm missing 3 more answers. If you haven't yet responded, please still do so. Ten people still haven't responded. I'll give you another 15 seconds. So the answers have been published. Will, I hope you can see them. So over to you.
Okay. Thank you, Ben. So quite a tough question to start with, and yeah, thanks, Ben. So a tough question, and I'm not surprised that some of you weren't able to answer, because of course, firstly, we don't know what school of the future is going to look like. It's impossible really to guess that. And secondly, it may be none of those things. There may be a different future. So this is what the iTEC project was about, trying to decide what we wanted and thought the future classroom would look like. And that's a really important message that we have at the beginning of the iTEC project. The future isn't something for us to guess or foresee. It's something we will build and will enable. So within the iTEC project and within this course, it's about deciding what we want the future classroom to look like and how we are going to work to develop that in the way which we think is most appropriate. So a bit of the background to the problem leading up to the project. In many countries, maybe yours, maybe not yours, but in many countries there's been a huge investment over the last 10 to 15 years in technology. So a lot of money spent by lots of governments and lots of computers, laptops, tablets now going into schools, and lots of research documents being produced, lots of reports. And the end result of that, well, actually, what we find is there's still a lot of very traditional teaching going on. So the investment, the technology, the research hasn't given us that future classroom, that change that we want. That change where learners have more engaging experiences in the classroom and where they develop more of those wider 21st century skills. It isn't happening, and it's not about the money, and it's not about the technology necessarily. So that was our starting point for the project. And this is summed up in this statement here, which is how we started the project. Over the last decade, there have been many scenarios for designing the future classroom, but they've all been blue sky thinking, so very futuristic, none of which have actually tackled the real challenges and problems and given us the change in education which we've been looking for. So the iTEC project decided to adopt a quite different methodology, and what we tried to look at is not actually the technology specifically, but more about the visions we collectively have about how we want to see learning and teaching develop, and how technology can support that. So the technology comes second here. What's more important to us is what do we want to see young people doing, what do we want to see teachers doing, and that's a collective view. That's why we really value the feedback we get from these webinars. So a final bit of background for the iTEC project. It was a very big project. Over 4 years, it involved 27 partners across Europe, as you can see from this map here. They were some of the major suppliers of technology, so Promethean and Smart, you may be familiar with. Also, several ministries of education. We started off actually with 14 ministries, but then several others joined on later on as associate partners, and several research organisations as well. Many universities from across Europe carrying out this work. So 27 partners, 14 ministries of education, and what we're looking for is a model for the deployment of technology into schools that can bring genuine benefit and genuine change. So I'll run through the process. The project is quite large and quite complex, as I mentioned, but actually, fundamentally, it can be described in quite a simple way. So the starting point is something you should now be familiar with. What we do is we bring together different stakeholders. So we bring together the ministries of education with their policy concerns and issues, and we bring together technology providers who understand the power and the value of emerging new technologies, and we put them together with experts in learning and teaching and experts in the use of technology, and of course we bring into this teachers and students to have a conversation. And that conversation is simply, how would we like to see the future classroom? How will technology make a difference? What are the policy changes? What are the challenges that teachers have? What would learners like to see happening in their classrooms? What would motivate them? And we use that information to create what we call future classroom scenarios. And we've already looked at that on this course. So the future classroom scenario is our vision for how we think the education classroom should be in the future. What we do with that is we turn that vision into some learning activities So practical examples of how that vision can be actually demonstrated in a classroom, how a teacher can actually teach and a learner can learn based on that vision we've created, and we test that out with classroom pilots to see what impact it has. During this process, of course, what we do is we support the use of technology. Now, that's mainly by ensuring that teachers and learners are exposed to available technologies, understand what's available, and as part of this course, you'll be introduced to several new technologies, which some of which you may not have used before, but following this course, you can go and use the next day or the next week. So we introduce technology and training and support. So the support trains and helps teachers develop new understanding, new ideas, new confidence in using these various technologies. And one of the key parts of this, we think, is really sharing. So we create teacher communities where teachers can work together to share ideas. And a key part of this course is actually you sharing your ideas with other colleagues on the course about the technology you use and some of the activities.
Sorry, Will. Sorry to interrupt there, Will. Just a quick note, quite a few participants are noting that the audio is going sort of up and down. So just to highlight it to you, just to see if you can make sure you stay constantly close to the microphone.
Okay, yep, that's no problem. I'll lean in a little bit, so hopefully you can hear me. But yeah, we'll keep an eye on that. Thanks, Ben. Okay, so the final step in the iTEC project is to take everything we've learned and try and mainstream this, which is to say mainstream it across many other schools and countries in Europe. So just to recap, the process is really about developing visionary scenarios and then turning those into learning activities and testing them out in the classroom. And that's what this course covers as well. Okay, so hopefully you should be familiar with the idea of a scenario. It's quite a simple document. It's simply an idea about the sort of thing that learners and teachers can do. Hopefully different from what normally happens in your classroom, and we've found that that is the case. So I've got some examples here of some of our early scenarios. The first one there, you can see a breath of fresh air, the outdoor study project. Now, for some of you in some countries, taking your learners outside of school and learning outside, maybe in a local environment or around town, is commonplace, that happens, but in many schools it doesn't, and many teachers are unconfident in doing it. So the breath of fresh air scenario gives an example of an activity where you take learners out to school. Beaming the experts, another example here, really involves bringing an expert into the classroom. So using technology, such as Skype or a webinar like this, to take an expert who could be a scientist, a doctor, a musician, to bring them into the classroom so they can impart their knowledge to the learners. So these are examples of scenarios. And when you look at those, they're interesting, they're innovative, but possibly challenging for the average teacher. Okay, just an example again of a question we'd like to answer, just to get a feeling for this. How many of you would often take your, or how often, sorry, do you take your learners, the students, outside of school to collect data using digital devices? So this is quite a simple thing to do, but we find it doesn't often happen in classes don't do it. So if you try and answer this question, how often is that something you do, taking learners outside of the classroom, out into the world, using digital devices to collect data? It could be for any subject.
Okay, the poll is now open, so you can start posting your responses. So about, again, sort of 30 seconds to 45 seconds. And I hope everybody can hear us well. Really sorry about the sound issues. "15 responses still missing." Okay, and I'll give another sort of 20 seconds. You haven't yet responded. So here we have the results, and I hope we can see them, and I'll pass over to you, Will, again.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. That's quite interesting. That's actually the result is higher than I would have anticipated. It's higher than we get from average teachers. Now, that's possibly because I would imagine that the fact that you're doing this webinar and you're interested in this is that you're not necessarily the average teacher. But still, it does seem that it's something you do once or twice a year. It's not necessarily common practice. Now, there's nothing wrong with this. It doesn't matter if you don't do that at all. What matters is that you give various diverse opportunities, and if it's something you haven't done before, it's something that maybe you could consider as well, or you might want to consider doing it more often. Okay, so I'm not going to talk too much more about individual scenarios. We haven't really got time to look at that, but you'll see through this course, and there's a link here as well, that there are a number of scenarios created in iTEC which you can have a look at, and they might give you some inspiration for new ideas, maybe doing some things you haven't tried before. And that's really fundamentally what this course is about. And there's a video link here also to we can't show the video on the webinar. There's a video link to a video which gives you an example of a scenario in case you want to see that again.
We'll be posting the recording of the webinar, of course, later on. Sorry, Will. So you can get the link from there then as well.
Okay, thanks, Ben. So moving on, the scenario, as we said, a learning plan is simply a vision. It's something created by policymakers, teachers, technology suppliers as a vision of what we hope to see in the classroom. And it includes things like 21st century skills, and also various technologies that are emerging. So it's this vision, but then putting that vision into reality is the real trick, it's the real challenge. And that really takes teachers to look at the vision and say, what challenges and barriers are there for me? Do I have the resources available? Do I have the time to do this? How would I do that? If it involves collaboration with outside experts or other teachers, how is that actually achievable? And we have a process which we're going to move into in this course, which is the development of learning activities. So the scenario is a vision, and from that you can create specific learning activities. And we're going to show you some of those learning activities on this course. Before we do that, I just want to mention the link here is to a document called Educata. Now, Educata was produced by Aalto University, Finnish colleagues on the project, and it's a design process for designing learning activities. So that gives you a much more detailed overview of this than we do on this course, so it may be something you'd want to look at in more depth. But to explain a little bit more about what exactly a learning activity is, well, a learning activity is quite simple. It's something that could take a lesson or a small part of a lesson or maybe a bit longer than that. And it's simply an idea that you can put into practice in your classroom. And we have developed many of these learning activities in this project, and you'll see several of these on this course. I'm just showing you one example here. This is a learning activity called Dream, and Dream is simply about allowing learners to come up with new ideas amongst themselves. So it's really about collaboration and creativity. So coming up with ideas, having the confidence to develop these ideas, but working with other students to share ideas and mould their ideas together. And what learning activity provides is an idea about the sorts of tools and resources you can use within that activity. So for example here, hopefully you're now familiar with TeamUp as a tool that's introduced in this course. And there are other tools here you'll be familiar with perhaps or see later on, such as Call4Me and Blogger, tools for collaboration, sharing ideas. So this is some activity that could be used in a whole range of subjects, in a whole area of courses. And the activity also gives you ideas about what students gain from this and what they're going to learn. That's a learning activity, and you'll be using some of those later on. Okay, again, we'd like to know more about what actually happens in your classrooms across Europe. So one of the things that happens a lot in our learning activities, we try and encourage, is this collaborative work. And also we give students the opportunity to work in groups and negotiate their own learning goals. So the dream activity is really about them deciding what they want to do, what kind of product they want to do, so video, a poster. So how often do you give your students the opportunity to negotiate their outputs, their learning goals, what they're going to achieve? Is that something you do frequently, or maybe not at all?
Okay, thanks, Will. The poll is open now, so please post your answers now. Well, just quickly to flag up again, there's a couple of people mentioning audio problems, so please remember to stay close to the microphone. Let's see. 20 responses still missing. And 16 people haven't yet responded. Do please provide your answer to this question. We'll give another 20 seconds. Just click your option and then click the submit button at the bottom of that window. Okay, and I'm closing the poll now.
So the idea that quite a lot of you do allow your learners to develop.
Okay, well, we've got you back on audio, but we missed the beginning of what you were just saying. So if you could just start again, that would be great.
Okay, right, sorry. Yeah, I was just saying, it's again, as with the previous poll, is a more positive response than we would normally expect. I think it's because many of you are probably more advanced teachers and probably more experimental in your teaching. For many people, there's a real challenge, there's a real barrier because the curriculum and assessment models don't necessarily allow you to give students the freedom and flexibility to choose their own learning pathways and their own learning goals. And that's a real challenge that we find difficult to overcome, and it's more difficult in some countries than others. But yeah, giving learners the flexibility to develop their own ideas about what they want to learn and how they want to learn, giving that independence can be very motivating, and we found that in the iTEC project. And there are a collection of learning activities you can view, you can look at, and there are links to those in the course, and there's a link here in this webinar. So a whole range of other learning activities you can look at later. Okay, so just to go back, we've got this process in place for developing learning scenarios and then using those to develop learning activities. And we've done this across a number of countries across Europe. And we've carried out pilots. So we've asked teachers like yourself, some of you may have been involved, we've asked teachers like yourself to actually deliver some of these innovative learning activities in their own classrooms. And the numbers here show you the number of pilots that were involved in the project. In fact, this data, the last time we collected this data was earlier in the project. The number of pilots has now risen to over 2,500. So it's a large-scale project, the largest of its kind. And the results of this were, for us, quite outstanding. We gathered information from the teachers involved. We also did polls of the students involved. and we asked people to go and do independent observations just to ensure the data we were getting from our study was correct. And these are the kinds of results that we've got. So, for example, if I pick out a couple of these, we asked learners and teachers, did they think the skills for collaborative work increased by using these iTEC future classroom learning activities? And the answer overwhelmingly, 90% of teachers and students agreed that yes, there was a much greater opportunity for developing collaboration skills. Creativity skills, again, 90% reported that there was a much greater opportunity for having creativity skills developed. More active learning, greater engagement in schoolwork, ways to express themselves were improved as well. Now, I suppose this shouldn't be too surprising. If we are specifically designing learning activities to tick those boxes to make sure students can develop those skills, are given opportunities to collaborate more, work more creatively, work more independently, and of course, we would hope the results would be positive. But they are very big positive results. So the adoption of these learning activities clearly is having an impact in those classrooms where they're being used. We're also interested to find out about how this impacts on teachers, what the result was for them. So if a teacher uses one of these learning activities, how does it benefit and help them? Well, again, there's some really positive results here. So 87% of teachers, for example, said that these learning activities help them to incorporate new pedagogical, new teaching practices in their teaching. 75% of them said their knowledge of ICT increased by using these learning activities, but 84% were more interested in using ICT. So clearly great benefits simply from adopting and using some of these learning activities. So we hope, of course, that you'll be able to look at the learning activities we show you and adopt some of them yourself, develop them further, and hopefully develop some of your own, and that will have the same beneficial impact on you and your learners. So, next question. For you, and again, this is important for us, it really helps us in the project. For you, which of these benefits would be most interesting to you professionally? Would you rather develop new teaching, new pedagogical practices and new teaching approaches? Or is it an increased and more effective use of ICT that you think is more important to you? Or do you think actually supporting individual students' needs is the most important thing? So for you as a teacher, what did you want to gain? And it's a tough question because it might be all for you, but which is most important?
Okay, thanks, Will. The poll is open again, so you should be able to respond already. The answers are coming in very fast this time. I'll 12 people left to respond. Okay, last 20 seconds.
Okay, thanks for that. Again, a very interesting result. A quick result as well. I guess that your people are working out how to answer polls quick enough, because I think that was a tough question. Again, I would find it difficult to choose between the three of those. But what's interesting, I think, is that most of you have gone for what we would expect, which is that what's important is teaching. For you, learning new approaches, new practices for teaching. And the effective use of technology is secondary to that. But they're all equally valid, so it's difficult, and everyone has their own individual needs as a teacher to develop these different practices and skills. So there's no right answer there, of course, for that one. Okay, so towards the end of the project, we had these very convincing results. It's a very large-scale study, so we have a solid foundation for these results. So for us, we thought, what is the next step? How do we ensure that other schools across Europe are able to benefit in the same way as those schools that have still been, that have been involved in the iTEC project? Well, part of that is, of course, this course, and we do this course online and we do it face-to-face. There are various versions of this course and some versions running in other countries. And central to that are the processes and tools that this course discusses. So what is a scenario? How do you develop it? Who's involved? How do you then create learning activities? And how do you test those out in the classroom? So we created this toolkit, which we call EduVista, which goes through that process of identifying the key stakeholders, looking at your school and doing innovation maturity modeling, so working out where your school is in terms of the level of innovation that's already happening in the classroom and where you think you can get to realistically in terms of increased levels of innovation, looking at trends, changes in society, changes in technology, and how you can accommodate those and use those opportunities, and bringing this together to develop scenarios. So we created the toolkit EduVista, which is open to everybody to use, and we've created training around that so people can use those tools and experience them. Just to finish off, really, fundamentally, what we found within the project is the most successful thing that we've been able to do is to take this model, which I think we're all probably familiar with, many of us, of this teacher who is somebody who works alone. They're isolated in the classroom. They're not necessarily exposed to new ideas and new ways of teaching or new technology. And this is absolutely no fault of the teacher. It is the way education is structured. The teacher in the classroom is fairly isolated. And what we try and do is use technology to break down the walls. This is very much what we're trying to do on this course. So the technology breaks down the walls by enabling communication between teachers. Teachers sharing ideas, which is what we wanted to do here. Sharing ideas about new technologies, new teaching practices, sharing your understanding of what works, what's challenging, and how to overcome those challenges. And the end result we hope to get from this process, and we have been getting, is a more innovative, more connected teacher. The teacher is a collaborative designer of learning, with new ideas, new visions, new contacts with other teachers, leading to new practices and new tools being used in the classroom. So this is the goal, to connect people, and that's what all the tools in our toolkit enable us to do. Sharing ideas, sharing practices, and then creating this new vision of the future classroom. Now, one final question I want to ask you, and again this benefits us as well, is the technology we use in the project, some of the technology we've developed, has enabled us to support teachers in sharing ideas. And there are 4 technologies we've used. I'm going to explain what they are very simply, and then I'd like you to identify which one you think sounds the most interesting to you. Okay? So obviously you're going to base this on my description, but which of these 4 technologies do you think would be most helpful to you to connect you with other teachers to share ideas and technologies? The first of these is a widget store. This is simply somewhere you can go. It's like an apps store. You'd be familiar with that, the kind of app store or Play Store, where you can go and find new tools and new technologies to use, often free things you can download. So the widget store, a kind of app store for education. The persons and events directory, this is a directory, a place you can go where you can connect to new people, so you can meet other teachers, meet other experts, and you can also find out about things that are going on, educational events that might be relevant to you. So you might think of this as a kind of Facebook or LinkedIn for education. The third tool is a composer, and this is a tool that helps you create learning activities. It's a template and gives you guidance on writing and sharing a learning activity. And the final one, unusually named, but the scenario development environment is a tool which allows, it provides you with examples of technologies that you might find useful. So if you think of something like Amazon, where Amazon will give you examples of the sorts of things you might want to buy because that understands your background, then the scenario development environment does a similar thing. It provides you with examples of learning technologies you might find useful based on your background. So very quickly, as the poll is being launched, the widget store is a kind of app store, place you can go to find new tools. Personal event directory is a kind of LinkedIn place for social networking with other teachers. The composer is a tool for creating learning activities. And finally, the scenario development environment is a place that gives you recommendations for tools that you might find useful based on information that holds about you. Okay, so it'd be interesting to know which of those 4 things you would find most useful.
Okay, thanks a lot, Will. The poll is already open for about 30 seconds, so a lot of answers are already coming in. If you haven't yet answered, please still use the opportunity. "16 answers still missing." Okay, last chance to respond to this poll. Last 20 seconds or 30 seconds. We can't hear you again. Will, we can't hear you. Just check your microphone.
What I'm most interested in is the scenario development environment. So it's good to see the positive response to that. So thank you very much for that. That is
sorry, Will, we missed the first part of what you were saying again with some microphone issues. So if you could just quickly repeat what you were just saying.
Yeah, I was just thanking everybody for the result and saying it is very valuable to us. It does reinforce our own work, and to get that positive response for particularly the scenario development environment is very helpful. So thank everybody. Thank you all for that response. Okay, so just to finish off, really, just to tell you where we are with this project. The project, as Ben said, it's coming to an end now. We're in the last month. We've actually redesigned the Eduvision toolkit, and we've turned it into something we're calling the Future Classroom Toolkit, which goes through the whole process of writing scenarios, developing learning activities, and testing them out. And we've tried to make it much more multimedia. So there's video, there are interactive tools, so there's going to be an interactive maturity model that can be used within that. And this is something we're going to promote to other schools across Europe so that it can be used. And we're quite optimistic about the value and potential of this. We hope it's something you'll look out for in the future yourself, the Future Classroom Toolkit. But we have several methods we're going to use to ensure that we get the large-scale impacts of change that we're looking for. One, of course, is as European SchoolNet, we work directly with Ministries of Education. And the Ministries of Education are very interested in adopting these approaches in their schools across their countries, in many of those countries. So we're going to see these approaches being adopted, hopefully by more ministries. We have a good contact with providers of technology. Some of the major technology providers are partners with European SchoolNet. So we're talking to technology providers about how they can use these approaches when talking to schools about implementing technology. So it's not just a case of selling technology, it's a case of supporting schools in using it as well. There's training providers we're working with. And we're also hoping for our own training and courses like this to inspire teachers like you to become involved and spread the message to your colleagues. So there are various approaches we have to get the impact we're looking for. Okay, so that really completes the webinar from me. Thank you all for your participation and your responses. That's very helpful. Thank you, Ben, for coordinating this. And I believe we have some time for questions. Is that right, Ben?
Yes, absolutely. So if you do have any questions about iTEC or anything that Will has mentioned, then please post them into the chat now so that Will can respond. Looks like you've answered most of the questions. Just see a question coming in here from Maria Teresa. How can we cope with the gap among different countries? Well, is that something that was you came across and addressed in the iTEC project? Well, we can't hear you again.
Different countries. And
Well, sorry, we missed the first part of that again.
Okay. So yeah, so it's a gap between different countries. So I'm going to assume there's lots of gaps. One of the gaps is obviously the availability of technology, which is a real challenge. But we have to look at what's available and what we can do with what's available. And internet access, young people having access to their own mobile devices, increasingly more in the future, is one area where the gap isn't necessarily too huge. But it is a challenge. There's a gap in policy as well. What the Future Classroom Toolkit starts with is by asking you to think about where you are now and where you want to get to. So we're not asking every school to get to the same place. Everybody has a starting point, and that's what the innovation maturity model works with. How long was the project planned? A year before it started. Okay, and apologies for the sound. We did do a check, so I'm not sure why for some of you it's more of a problem than others.
We apply for team courses in Brussels. I guess that's maybe a question for me more. I assume you mean, Laurent, Future Classroom Lab courses in Brussels? You can absolutely apply to participate in these courses. What I'll do is I'll post a link to more information into the chat in a second. There is funding available for these courses via the Erasmus Plus program from the European Commission. So if you have managed to secure some Erasmus Plus grants, that is an opportunity to use that funding to come to some of those courses. Though if you haven't done that yet, the application deadline is over, so that will be possible again in the next round. There is also an opportunity to come to the courses at the Future Classroom Lab via the eTwinning project. So the National Support Services of the eTwinning network are funding some of the teachers to come to the Future Classroom Lab. Again, if you have a look at the link and if you check with your National Support Service, if you are part of the eTwinning project, then you will get more information via those.
Very good question we've got from a good question from Marta. What to start with? That's a really good point. There is a lot there. You can start with whatever you like. I would suggest you look at some of the technologies the course is showing you. So say Team Up, look at that, see if you want to use it. Start with there, look at the other technologies. Then maybe look at the scenarios. Look at some of these interesting scenarios and decide which one of those you might want to use. The next step, once you've understood the scenario, and you just use that for inspiration to give you ideas, is then maybe to look at some of the learning activities. One of the other areas you can start with is simply by using the community to share your ideas and your thoughts with other teachers. That's a really powerful way of getting new ideas and to help other people with their own new ideas. So get involved in the community. So you can start with any of those, I think.
Well, we've lost your audio again, or at least I can't hear you anymore. Will, we've lost your audio again. Will, we've lost your audio again. Well, in the meantime, maybe I can answer the question regarding how can schools take part in iTEC projects.
Join the community.
Will, sorry, we lost your audio again, so we missed the answer to your question.
Yeah, so it's about the how to participate in projects like iTEC. Yeah.
Yes. So if you could repeat that, please.
Yeah. So I'm suggesting that one of the best things they could do is to join the Future Classroom community, which is run by EUN, and if we have you as a member of that community, then we can contact you if we feel that there's a project you might be interested in being involved in. So that's probably a question really for you, Ben and Alina, about ensuring that at the end of this course, people are able to join the Future Classroom community.
So yes, thanks, Will. So we are in the process of setting up this Future Classroom community. We're about to launch a new website for the Future Classroom Lab, and that will involve a community element where people can share future classroom scenarios and interesting learning activities. So if you sign up to that community once it's launched, and we hope to launch that in early September, but well, we'll inform you definitely via the Future Classroom Scenarios group on Facebook and by email via the UN Academy. I should also add that a lot of the projects that we run here at European SchoolNet are, we work together with the Ministries of Education. So the Ministries of Education suggest schools, suggest teachers who can then participate in our project. So it's probably also a good idea for you to get some contacts to some of the projects run by the Ministries of Education in your country, and that will be a way into joining the projects that European SchoolNet runs. Okay, thanks a lot, everyone. I think we'll call it a day. Thanks for all the participation and the interesting questions. Obviously, do please continue asking those questions via the forum or via the Padlets and Tri-Siders and all the other channels that we're using on this course. And I hope you will be enjoying the last 3 modules. We'll be opening up Module 4 on Monday, or Sunday evening, in fact. So, and hopefully see you, of course, next week on the 3rd webinar of the course, which will be Bart Versivel talking about students as digital leaders. So that's it. Have a good night. Just one thing before I forget. When the webinar ends, you will be automatically transferred to a short questionnaire, short survey about this webinar. So we would really appreciate your feedback. If you could answer that, that would be great. And well, apologies for the sound issues, but I hope you still managed to hear all the key elements of the webinar. Okay, thanks a lot and goodbye.